Yes. The MMA After Hour is here. A mini version of the MMA Beat. Let's bring in my two pals, Danny Segura and GSP. Dare I say, we continue to get better looking as the show goes on. We go from GSP to Paulo Costa to these two fine gentlemen, Jeff Wagenheim and Danny Segura. How great is this? Jeff, how are you? Danny, how are you, my friend?
Good.
It's good to have you guys here.
I imagine your first question is whether I've ever been a model.
Yeah, a model, the phone number thing, that whole bit.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. And so usually we do the beat on Thursdays, as you guys know. Wanted to do like a mini version of the beat because so much has gone on. I don't know how much you guys heard of the GSP interview, but I'm just most of it. Okay, I'll ask you first, Jeff. Do you think he fights Robert Whittaker? What was your impression?
My gut says no. I mean, he was he was very good at, as he said, sort of bobbing and weaving at all your questions.
Yeah.
He didn't want to talk about retiring. He didn't want to talk about other possibilities. My gut says no, but I have nothing to go on other than just that feeling.
Just based on what he's saying and reading his body language, what did you think, Danny?
I would say no. He, when you asked him about it, I mean, the way he talked about Robert Whittaker, I mean, he was very respectful. He was like, he's a great martial artist, but he didn't really seem too excited as perhaps maybe the Michael Bisping fight that he really vouched for it. So,
like he didn't come out definitively and say, okay, this is what's next.
Yeah.
He keeps saying it's in his contract.
Exactly.
Right.
Which is true, which is a fact, but he's not actually committing to it. So let's just say you're Team GSP, you're Dana White, you're the UFC. What is the best spot for GSP? What do you want to see him do next?
If I'm those guys, I want him to get the biggest money fight or the biggest splash, which obviously would be I'm the guy whose name I promised I would not say, but you know who it is. And
you could say it.
But for me, not GSP, the guy that I think I want to see him fight, I want to see him go to his natural weight division. I want to see him, fight Woodley. But it seems like the UFC, or at least Dana White, has no interest in booking Tyron Woodley with anybody. So
wow. Okay, so you actually don't want to see him fight Whittaker.
I just don't think that's his. I don't think that's a great weight class for him. So plus I think that there's a ton of people who are in that weight class who are, who could angle for that spot. So I mean, I know you could probably say the same thing for welterweight, but GSP was longtime welterweight champion.
Yeah.
He could be a two-weight champion again.
Sure.
I mean, so he could sort of do in reverse what the Irish guy did.
Why are you so against saying his
I promised
name?
somebody online.
You
that I
did.
would not mention.
You actually promised someone.
No.
Why? What's wrong with the Connor? I mean, he's right over there. He's a big part of the sport.
Okay.
What's wrong with him?
Somebody said they would give a $100 donation to a charity.
Really?
If I didn't.
Louise, not such a bad. So you would actually advocate for him to relinquish the belt, GSP go down, or do you want to see him be a champion like Connor did?
I'm not sure how the way things are these days. It's so
you don't want
fluid.
Someone to be a champion in two different ways.
I don't.
It holds things up, right?
It does, yeah.
I also feel like he's at that point in his career where even though typically I'm so all about the belts, I feel like he's at this point in his career. He is such a legend that the next fights should be fights that are really kind of blockbuster fights. And maybe a Whittaker fight is that in the sense that it's in terms of competition, but seeing him return to his long the weight class that he for a long time dominated, that'd be kind of cool.
What do you do?
I don't know. I would like to see him defend the belt. There's obviously a really
185.
Famous, there's a really famous saying in MMA, you're not the champion until you've actually defended the belt. I feel like if, and don't get me wrong, what he did on Saturday night was amazing, but I feel like if he were to either retire or go to a different weight class, say 170, there would always be like a little asterisk there, like, he won the belt, but, he didn't really beat anybody at 185 to get it, and he didn't really defend it. I would like to see him defend it, restore some order in the middleweight division, get that title unification bout with Robert Whittaker. And if he gets past Robert Whittaker, I think, that just takes his... the level of his achievement of gaining the middleweight crown, that just takes it to a whole nother level. And then after that, I think he's in his own right to vacate it and perhaps chase that money fight with Connor, or Tyron Woodley, whatever.
You think there's a chance he never fights again?
I think it's possible.
I feel, I actually feel like it's possible. Like he didn't definitively say no to that either, right? Which is a crazy concept. You come all the way back, right? You do the whole thing, and then you say peace out.
Yeah, I got to admit that part of the reason I came early.
Okay.
It was because I thought that was what he was going to announce.
Oh, really?
Wow. I kind of felt like.
Why? Why did you feel that way?
I don't know. He decided to come on your program a special.
Because he knows that this is the program.
I thought that was what was going to happen.
Really?
I was kind of expecting it.
Wow.
So
you wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't fight again.
I would not be shocked. In fact, I would say that if I were, thinking about all the different possibilities, it would be just as likely in my mind that he doesn't fight again as Whitaker or welterweight, any of those possibilities. I would say I would weigh that one just as heavily as the others.
I mean, he just accomplished something great. I mean, he just became a part of a very selected few that have been, champions in the UFC in 2 different weight classes. And the way he did it was amazing. From what it seems, apparently the pay-per-view did very well.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to retire on top. GSP's always been a very smart fighter. If he were to call it quits after this one, I think, that'd be very GSP-like.
Yeah, he left the sport at a time when he was sort of mentally sapped.
Yeah.
And he knew enough to get out of the sport at that time. And think about some of the other great fighters, because I know that we've talked about after he won this belt, is he the greatest ever? Think about some of the other people who you would put in that category. You think of a guy like Fedor Emelianenko, and think about what his career was like once he sort of lost it a little bit. He's started losing fights, and then he started winning fights against kind of nobodies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what he's done. Then you think about a guy like Anderson Silva. He's won 1 of his last 6 fights. He didn't know when to get out of the sport. GSP knew when to get out. Then he decided he was ready to get back in. But who's to say he's not ready to? He just didn't want this challenge. And then
and it's fascinating to hear him talk about how much he actually hates fighting.
Yeah,
this isn't something he spoke about in the past. You hear that from the Nick Diaz's of the world. He said that, but I get the impression he really doesn't like doing this. He likes the aftermath, he likes the training, he likes maybe the buildup, but the actual week and the stress and the tension, why keep doing it if you hate it that much?
I sort of feel like the moment that the referee waves him and his opponent together, his distaste for it seems to go away. I don't see that in that moment, but certainly in the moment coming up to it. I mean, he talked all that stuff he talked to you about, in the back when he was thinking he was in the jinxed locker room, and all that stuff was really fascinating. And I can imagine, there's very few moments where I can imagine myself in the place of one of these athletes, because they do things that I certainly would never do. But that's the one where I think if I was in the back waiting to go out there and be locked into a cage with another highly trained professional fighter, I would be kind of nervous as well. And then here's a guy who has more skills than just about anybody on the planet, and he has that emotion.
But I think that happens to everyone.
To a degree.
To a degree, of course. Matt Brown has talked about how he wanted to take an Uber and leave the arena. Donald Cerrone has said that he gets super nervous.
James Vick actually did an interview with MMA Junkie this past week and said he has seen fighters freak out in the locker room, and he thinks that they're mentally weak. Why would you freak out? So I think that there are two different sides of the spectrum. But yes, it is a natural thing, right? You're going into a cage with another human being.
I think once you're in there, once you're in the actual fight, all that goes away, and then, the reward of winning is way greater than the little stressful moment that I guess you go through in the locker room. But yeah, I think, it was really interesting, GSP talking about all this, and I feel like to a degree it bothers him more than maybe more other fighters. Uh-huh. But it's crazy how long he kept the title for, and yet he feels
with all that stress.
Yeah, with all that stress, and he doesn't really enjoy fighting. It was back-to-back fights, and I feel like he really enjoyed this process. So
is he the greatest ever?
It's funny because John Jones comes back, beats Cormier, and he's the greatest ever. DJ goes ahead, breaks a record, does the mighty whiz bar. He's the greatest ever. Mm-hmm. Now GSP does this, and I think he really did cement himself as one of he's by far, I think, the most decorated fighter. His resume, name value of the people he beat, 2 titles in the UFC. For that sense, I think, he's the most decorated fighter ever. As far as skill-wise, I'd still like to put Demetrius up there. Okay. Just because I feel like Demetrius is such a complete fighter. But, I mean, if you were to tell me that GSP is the greatest ever, I wouldn't really have much, it's up there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, until the last faux pas of John Jones, I would have said that far and away that there was no discussion, that it was John Jones all the way. But once you pop for an anabolic steroid, that puts a black mark on you that I think is really difficult to get away. And then Anderson Silva, the other guy, like I said, one win in his last 6 fights. Now I know Anderson Silva at peak was probably better than anybody that I ever saw. But I think you have to include somebody's career. If they stay in there, their career kind of continues. And he continued at a high level, but was losing. GSP, the only 2 losses on his resume, he avenged violently. I mean, both guys that he lost to, he went back and dominated, and held one belt for a long time, goes and wins another belt after a 4-year absence. I just can't see anybody else who I could put above him.
Does he get extra points, and conversely, do John Jones and Anderson Silva lose points because of the PED stuff?
Totally, for me.
Yeah.
For me. I mean, I think that, look, from what I saw in the octagon, John Jones was most amazing fight I ever saw. Anderson Silva had moments when he was that guy, but once you taint yourself in that way, I think you lose some points. I wouldn't discredit them at all. If there was no GSP out there, I might still rank one of those guys number 1. But GSP exists, and GSP has, to all appearances, been a clean fighter and advocated for others to be clean.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that gives him huge points.
Yeah, because once you fail a test, like we're not really exactly sure how much PEDs actually enhance in MMA. We're not really sure, but I mean, could it be a decisive factor in like winning or losing? Probably. So especially now that like USADA's in place, and say a guy pops for, and then they were fighting before the USADA era, then it kind of makes you question like, maybe they were on, maybe they weren't. Who knows? But there is that question with GSP. He's passed every single drug test, USADA post,
Fascinating to hear him say that he's in favor or okay with steroids if it's like for a movie or something. Like some people are just across the board, I don't want to see it, but to make that distinction, I've never heard him say that.
I mean, I never heard him say it either, but I think it is a kind of a silly thing for people to discount that. I mean,
sure.
I know people that, that they have asthma and they take a steroid.
Sure.
Thing. I mean, there are plenty of medicinal or therapeutic uses of steroids, and I don't think that the whole point is that for this competition, these are substances that allow you to train better and train longer and train harder and recover when you otherwise might be depleted, and that allows you to make yourself a better fighter. GSP has had to make himself a better fighter in a natural way, and that's a disadvantage, so sure.
Jeff, let me ask you this. You've been covering sports for a long time, I think like 60, 70 years, right? Something like that?
Not quite. About 55.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were in the arena on Saturday.
Yeah.
I was in the back. I actually never stepped foot at MSG. I was doing like the scrums and things like that. Being there, you've been to a lot of events. MMA or not, I mean, was that one of the greatest sporting events that you've ever, and especially like those top 3, like that last 90 minutes or whatever it was, what was it like being in, and especially like the world's most famous arena, MSG, it's not just any arena, right? What was it like for those that weren't there?
It was absolutely incredible. It really was. I think particularly if you think about the order of events.
Yeah.
If anybody were to say beforehand which of these 3 title fights is the sure thing, I think we would have all said, that Rose versus Joanna is probably the sure thing for the champion to come out and win that. And it was right from the start when Rose dropped her, I thought, oh, cool, now it's going to be a fight, because I thought, at least it'll be a competitive fight. But the idea that she was then going to go out moments later and finish her, it was one of the most stunning results that I've ever seen, in that moment live. And then the fights that came after it again, TJ gets dropped in the first round, and I don't know how, I'm not sure what the TV broadcast showed, but when he got up, he was wobbly and going back to his corner. There was some thought that, geez, maybe they won't even let this fight continue, because he really was sort of wobbling along to his corner. And for him to then come out and do what he did, and then of course, GSP coming back from 4 years. I don't think that I've ever seen a UFC event that I would put above this, just because of 3 champions. Just seeing 3 title fights is special. To see any belts change hands is special. To see 3 belts change hands is special, and then to see all 3 happen in sudden, violent finishes. Sure. I mean, I just don't see anything better.
Also, you have 2 undefeated champions losing for the first time. It's GSP coming back, all that stuff and more. Danny, let me ask you about TJ. Great win, as Jeff just laid out. And we've talked a lot on this show about the TJ DJ thing, right? And I think that most of us were against it when it was heading into the record-breaking fight. but I feel like now is the time to do it. And, Dominick Cruz is out. This changes things a little bit, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen to Jimmy Rivera. Jimmy Rivera now pushing for TJ Dillashaw. But to hear someone like TJ Dillashaw, who had just won the belt, his stature, champion, call out DJ, we've never had that before. Like, it's one thing with all due respect to the, Benavidez's or the Cejudas of the world, but like to hear like one of the champions of the UFC now with his resume say, I'm going to go beat that record or stop it. It's fake, all that stuff and more. That got me really excited. And I don't often like to see champion versus champion fights, but I feel like there's no one really there at 125. If Pettis wins, maybe, but he hasn't been very active. 135 is a little open right now, especially with Dominick getting injured. Do you want to see this fight, or do you prefer them to stay separate?
No, I do. I think, we often discussing like who's the GOAT, right?
Yeah.
I think Demetrius Johnson broke the record, and that adds, obviously, some, argument to his case. But other than that, is also fighting people outside of the weight class. What did Anderson Silva do? He went up to light heavyweight and took on bigger guys. What did GSP just do? Went up and took up the middleweight champion. I think, if DJ really wants to cement himself as one of the greatest, I think, the best step would be taking on TJ Dillashaw. I mean,
would it be at 125 or 130? Do you want to see it for the belt?
I would even like it to be at 135, to be honest.
135?
135 or 130.
You want DJ to go up?
Yeah, because I
But then the
look at
record,
it, I honestly
the record's
don't-
on a play.
Sure, but I honestly don't see. I don't know. I mean, TJ Dillashaw seems pretty confident he can make 125.
Oh, that's
but
the problem.
He's already pretty lean.
Yeah.
He's not. I don't see him carrying a little. Because, like, for example, when I saw Benavidez fight at 135 and DJ, I always thought, those guys could probably fight a weight class, down. They look significantly smaller than the other 35ers. TJ Dillashaw doesn't really look much smaller than the other 35ers. So I really don't think he can make.
So you think it's too risky?
I think there's also some
risky,
peril.
yeah.
I think there's a little bit of peril here because let's say they fight at 135 and Dillashaw wins the fight.
Yeah.
Your 125 champion still has a belt, and you look at him as well. He's still a champion, but he tried to go up to a higher weight class and lost, and he failed there.
Yeah.
And you don't diminish his 125 standing is not quite as diminished. Yeah. On the other hand, if Dillashaw, if your 135-pound champion goes and tries to fight at 125 and loses, suddenly, who's the bantamweight champion? I mean, he would be the bantamweight champion if they're fighting, but now your bantamweight champion can't even beat the guy at a weight class below. So I think it causes a little bit of a.
So why not just meet in the middle?
Well, because then what's at stake?
Just see who's the better man. Is that not big enough?
Just a super fight, I guess.
But see, if DJ goes up to 135, he can't fight those guys or doesn't, like, he's not at his best, right? So what if he wins? Well, right? I mean, because then you're stuck with him as champion. I feel like the story here is TJ going down to stop the streak, right? I was supposed to fight you before. Your streak is padded. You've been fighting nobodies. Now come face me. I feel like that's the story here, right?
But 10 pounds is a lot of weight, especially when you're, if you're light heavyweight dropping down to middleweight, it's a little easier. But when you're already 135, going down 10 pounds is a lot. I really don't think TJ can make 125.
I mean, maybe he can. I mean, I agree with you. That is the story, but I just was pointing out that there is a certain peril that I think you don't have to deal with when you have a lighter champion moving up. There's a little bit of this kind of a built-in, but we still have a 125-pound champion, and he doesn't get devalued the same way that I think Dillashaw would be severely devalued.
Sure.
I think 130 would be the perfect weight because Jeff brings up a good point. Like, sure, if DJ wins and you do as well, if DJ wins at 135, then that sort of creates issues because what is he going to defend 2 belts? Is he going to take on the other 35ers? What about TJ? Is he going to keep making that cut if he gets the flyweight belt? 130, you get a little bit of both worlds. Not a severe cut for Dillashaw, and it's more possible to make that fight. And it doesn't hurt either weight class if whatever the result may be.
Yesterday, we broke the news that Dominick Cruz is out of the fight on December 30th. This is a big blow. It's a very important fight. It's a number 1 contender fight at 135. I really feel bad for Jimmy Rivera. Jimmy Rivera postponed his honeymoon to take this fight. So, I mean, it's just a gut punch. Aljamain Sterling now campaigning for the fight. What do you guys want to see happen there? Do you want to see Jimmy just wait for Cruz? Do you think that he should be in the mix for TJ? Do you want to see that Aljamain fight? Any other ideas?
Well, one thing I did see that news, but I didn't see how long Cruz is out. I mean, I know the other fight that fell out, Frank Edgar, supposedly 6 weeks. but he's a
6 weeks for training, 12 total.
And but Cruz, it could be a longer term thing, and waiting is certainly with its own peril. It does seem as though the Rivera Aljamain Sterling thing, there's already some heat there. They don't like each other. There's a lot of back and
friction.
forth. I mean, as you know, that's not my domain. I'm not a big fan of all that kind of stuff. But when you're kind of desperate for a fight, you might as well make one where people might get into it, and it would certainly be an interesting matchup. So sure.
I feel like Jimmy Rivera has done so much and he deserves the title shot so bad that I would hate to, risk it all and take a fight that he doesn't need to take. Because in my opinion, he's already a top guy. I mean, I wouldn't be pissed if he were to go on and fight Dillashaw. I think it makes sense. I think if they don't make the Dillashaw-Demetrius Johnson fight, they have to plug in Jimmy
What do you prefer to see?
Man, that's a tough one. Because, as a fan, I guess I would like to see Dillashaw versus Demetrius Johnson, just because, that's never seen before. It's a super fight. That's what it really is. But just to be fair and be just, I think Jimmy Rivera deserves it. But, again, a tough one. But I guess as a fan, I would rather see Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson go at it.
Still can't get over what Rose Namajunas did and the way in which she did it, and her post-fight comments and her demeanor and just everything about her. She's such a fascinating individual. And I feel like we have this connection to her because we've seen her grow up in front of our eyes, from just being Pat Barry's girlfriend to the Invicta fighter, Ultimate Fighter. She gets the title fight early on in her career. She stumbles, works her way back up, etc. And she's had her ups and downs, with Pat and in Atlanta against Carolina, etc. And she finally does it. And afterwards, she didn't seem all that interested in an immediate rematch. And you can understand that. But on the flip side, you remember we were on this show and someone asked us a question last week, of the three champions, should they lose, who deserves an immediate rematch? We all picked Joanna, I believe, because she had successfully defended the title 5 times. Joanna says, come May, I'll be champion again. Rose is saying, I don't know if it makes sense, first round knockout, things like that. What do you think is going to happen, and what do you want to see happen?
I tend to think there will be a rematch.
Immediate.
Somewhat. I mean, I think that she's in the driver's seat now, and Rose.
Okay.
She's the champion, and and I also want to second your thoughts about how she handled not just the fight. I mean, the fight was amazing and how she performed, but the whole thing with talking about how just kind of shooting down this whole trash talking thing. I mean, it's really interesting when you think about it. The three non-trash talkers all won, and I think I even tweeted this out. There's only really one trash talker
left
of all the champions, of the 11 champions the UFC has. There's really only one person who treats opponents without respect. I can't think of the person's name, but I know there's one.
Okay, but that's not fair. Not without respect. He's actually quite respectful.
In aftermath.
Yes. Okay.
In the
fair
aftermath,
enough.
there is.
Fair enough.
But I'm talking about in the lead up. And using kind of negativity and using kind of insults and even sometimes going over the line and using racist talk, that kind of stuff in the lead up as a promotional tool. I'm never a big fan of that, and now we have 10 of the 11 champions who I don't think have any track record of doing that. And I think Rose is really a leading proponent of kind of coming in as saying, hey, I'm going to compete with you. So I'm a big fan of that, and so I think it's time to let her bask in her accomplishment. I think the obvious fight would be for her to fight against Joanna, and but I think it's fine for her to sort of sit back and take a little time.
Yeah, I don't think there's any clear contender at that weight class at the moment. I think
Michelle Waterson and Tisha Torres are fighting in December, but Rose actually has wins over both of them.
Yeah, and then especially Waterson, which was recent.
Yeah, very recent.
I think if Claudia Gadelha would have gone past Jessica Andrade, that would have been, a no-brainer. But she didn't.
Yeah.
Jessica Andrade just recently fought for the title. So I think everything points for an immediate rematch here. Plus, Jedrzejczyk wasn't one of these champions where she just won the belt and perhaps defended it once or twice. No, she had it for quite a while. Defended it 6 times. Right. I think an immediate rematch is the move to make.
So a fascinating thing here, because leading up to the fight, I was talking to Mark Ramundi about this, how Joanna's demeanor was reminding me a lot of Ronda Rousey's going into the Holly Holm fight, how she was getting a little too riled up, and it seemed like every time Rose was kind of ignoring it and shutting her off, Joanna was getting even more riled up and getting off her game and like putting her fist in her face. And then at the ceremonial weigh-ins, talking about how Pat Barry disrespected her, her coach and things like that. And it just reminded me a lot. And then, of course, we see what happens. But then, on the flip side, she did the complete opposite of Ronda. She shows up to the press conference. She takes accountability. Her team reached out to me and said, we'd like to come on your show. I mean, I never reach out to people who have just lost a title fight. I want to give them space. And they never reach out to me either. They don't ask to come on. They don't want anything to do with media. She wanted to come on and talk about it and show everyone I'm okay. And she even said herself, don't compare me to Ronda Rousey. But then she says the thing I didn't tap. And then people are kind of giving her crap. Can we give her a pass on that? Like people are like, oh, why didn't you push her? Why didn't you, why didn't you? Look, let her say what she wants. Let her believe what she wants. She just got knocked out, all that. Let's give her some credit. Like, we talk a lot about Ronda and how she handled it. And we've talked about how others have handled it well. That was pretty remarkable for someone who was on the cusp of tying history with everything she said, with everything she did, to lose like that on a stage like this, and then kind of, show up and take the heat. My respect for her went up, even if, it looked on television that she tapped. That doesn't really matter to me. I don't feel like that really means anything. She's not taking away anything from Rose. Do you disagree?
No, I don't. The whole tapping thing or non-tapping, I don't buy that anyway. I mean, I don't. This idea that tapping to being choked is okay, but if you tap the strikes,
you're a lesser person. It's crazy.
You don't get concussed by it.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty nasty thing, and I don't. So even if she did, I don't care whether she did or she didn't. And even watching it, you saw her hand touch, but first of all, it seemed as though the referee was already stopping the fight, and it also seemed as though it's also possible that she was just, sort of. I don't know, not really on purpose, just sort of hitting the mat. I mean, it didn't seem. If she says she wasn't tapping, I'm gonna buy that. And it doesn't matter.
Wasn't the man who was sitting here just a little bit ago tapped due to strikes at one point in his career, Georges St-Pierre? Matsera, and he's considered one of the GOATs. So I think we shouldn't put too much stock in. Oh, tap due to strikes. Who cares? And
her thing afterward. I mean, you pointed it out. Probably one of the first things she said at the post-fight press conference was, "Don't compare me to Ronda Rousey." It was amazing. So it was like she cut that off immediately, and so she did have that kind of Rousey-style lead-up. But then she completely turned around and was very cognizant of it. It wasn't she really.
No one asked her about it.
Right. She sort of pointed it out immediately, and I thought that was really good. So all power to her.
And also we see people when they lose and have like these huge losses. We saw Daniel Cormier was just devastated, sort of dwell on the loss. Joanna was just already, I'm gonna be back and I'm gonna get that rematch, and she was already looking forward to what's next.
All three champions, of course, handled their wins very well. And as you said, they're the non-trash talkers, so you sort of expect that. Right. All three former champions now, I thought, also handled their losses very well on Saturday. So I thought it was a really nice night for MMA and, just the honor involved in the sport. By the way, one last thing on Saturday. Do you guys want to see Michael Bisping fight again? I think that there was some kind of push to maybe have him retire. He said, I'm not going out like that. Do you care to see him fight again? He has a litany of people he could choose from, right? From Rockhold to Weidman, to Romero. Do you care to see him fight at this stage?
He's not one of those people who I don't want to see. So there are fighters like somebody else on that card. Johnny Hendricks wants to fight again. I'm not that interested in seeing
Certainly
him.
not against people like Paulo Costa, right?
I know. I just saw that guy walking out. I mean, I weigh him by about 100 pounds, and I'm not going anywhere near him.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't think that, but I would not lump Bisping in that category. I know that he's certainly suffered damage, his eye and so forth, and if he were to walk away, I would say more power to you, great. But if he decides that he doesn't want to leave the sport with that as the final moment, and he wants to take a fight, say in London, great. I mean, I've always enjoyed watching him fight. He's never, I think, other than maybe the one Rockhold fight, he's never had the first Rockhold fight. Yep. He's never had a fight where he was beaten sort of easily. Everybody who's beaten him has had to really work hard, and I don't think his skills are diminished. So whatever, if he wants to do it.
100% on the same boat. I mean, when we want guys to sort of walk away from the sport, it's guys that have been on a losing streak that are getting knocked out and they're just not themselves. Michael Bisping was doing well against Georges St-Pierre until he got caught. I mean, yes, he was taken down, but he was also got back on his feet. He was very competitive, and he was just champion. So this is not a guy that's been losing a lot and that needs to hang him up. I think he has a lot left in him, and he's also a guy that I think we'll miss him when he's gone. And these type of guys like Uriah Faber, you sort of want to see them walk away on good terms, with a win in their hometown. So I would love to see Michael Bisping fight one more time in the UK, against a favorable matchup. I think a lot of people are throwing out there Yoel Romero, Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, all these. One that's not being talked about that I would actually like to see would be Vitor Belfort. Vitor Belfort, I know he's also one of those guys that's towards the end,
Rematch.
but he's
the guy
coming
who
off.
gave him the eye injury.
Yeah, he's coming off a win. That'd be an opportunity for Michael Bisping to get back, a loss that he had. I think many would agree that perhaps this time around, if they face is different terms.
Yeah.
It'd be, Vitor Belfort still carries a big promotional name to headline a card or be a co-main event or something.
And this time in England, how about that?
I'll co-sign that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, there is a long list.
love to see that fight.
We're running out of time, so let's play a quick game of Fact or Fiction here, okay? Fact or Fiction, the UFC should now book Cub Swanson against Max Holloway in Detroit after Frankie Edgar got injured. News came out yesterday.
I'll say fiction.
Fiction.
Okay. Well, because I'm more interested in the fight than I am in the date. So I think that the Frankie Edgar fight is the fight to make if they can wait for Frankie Edgar. And if they can't, didn't Jose Aldo come out yesterday and say he would do it?
You'd rather Jose Aldo against Max Holloway, too.
I think if Holloway's going to get a replacement opponent, I think Aldo is a better opponent than Swanson.
That is fascinating. And we can't forget that Swanson actually beat, Holloway beat Swanson rather definitively in Newark.
Right.
A little, what was it, like 3 years ago or so. Right. So, and of course he just beat Jose Aldo. No really great answer here, and especially on just a few weeks' notice. What do you do, fact or fiction?
I would like to say fact, just because if you look at the top 5 of the featherweight division, it's Jose Aldo, Ricardo Lamas. Those two are fighting each other. Who else is in there?
Artem Lobov.
Of course, Frankie Edgar, but
Brian Ortega's in the mix.
And then the other guy is Cub Swanson. I think it makes sense. Plus, I think we've went through a patch in MMA where everything was sort of felt clogged. The middleweight division felt clogged. Conor sort of clogged the lightweight division and the featherweight division. I just want things to get, even Cody Garbrandt's injury, the fight with Dillashaw was supposed to happen a while back. I just want to see, titles get defended, things get moving along.
But it is a title fight. So, I mean, and it was supposed to be Edgar. And if you're going to replace the challenger, I think it has to be somebody who's either has been a champion or is ready to be a champion. I think Aldo's.
Holloway wants to remain on the card. He's very vocal about that. Yesterday, Holly Holmes' agent, Lenny Fresquez, told me the Cyborg fight is dead. It's not happening at 219. Fact or fiction, the UFC should now do Amanda Nunez versus Cris Cyborg because Nunez doesn't have an opponent at 135. Raquel Pennington breaking her leg in a car accident.
At what weight class?
At 145 or 140? I don't know. Keep them busy.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not.
There's no opponent for both of them, and they don't have a main event for 219 now. Maybe Conor comes up. Dare I say his name?
I don't know though. I don't know that you've got a champion at 135, and unless there's a compelling reason to have her move up by 10 pounds, I don't know that you want to mess around with that.
Okay, so you say fiction.
I'll say fiction.
I say fiction. Yeah, I honestly don't think Amanda Nunez wants to fight Cris Cyborg. I think that goes both ways. I just don't see them fighting each other. The women's featherweight division is very interesting. I don't know who they're going to bring in, but the person that made sense was Holly Holm. I would like to see that fight get booked down the line. If not UFC 219, oh well. But certainly at some other event.
And things that have been dead have often been resuscitated.
I do feel, though, that he's going to stick to his guns on this one after speaking to him, at least for December 30th. Maybe down the line, as he said, but for December 30th. Fact or fiction, you want to see Darren Till versus Wonderboy Thompson, as Dana White said. Now, that whole story is kind of confusing. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was, I don't know what to make of the whole thing. The reporting, to be quite honest, was a little bit confusing. But it's clear he wants to make that fight. However, Wonderboy's dad told me he absolutely does not want to see that fight happen. He has a doctor appointment today, Wonderboy does, to check out his thumbs. But that fight, do you like it next for both guys, or do you side with Mr. Thompson, who says thanks but no thanks?
Yeah, I'm also going to go fiction with that one. I'm Mr. Fiction this time.
Okay.
I just fiction because, Wonderboy is the number 2 guy in that division, and I think Till needs another fight in order to get to that point.
Okay.
And I'm not sure who that fight would be, but I think he needs one more to move up.
Platinum Perry.
I'll say fiction, and the UFC needs to chill. I mean, Darren Till just came off as the biggest superstar. Everyone's talking about him, and putting him up against Steven Wonderboy Thompson is a huge mistake. We just saw what he did to Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal is more experienced than Till, a great striker, can wrestle, good ground game, and he just made him look confused. Masvidal just couldn't figure him out. I think Thompson is one of the hardest fights in the division, just given his style, and to put Till would be, very risky. He would probably get a loss there, and then his whole stardom
Right.
would go down. I would like to see him get, a manageable fight that would still test him, but, that's more closer to his range.
Yeah, and even if you do win that fight, it's hard to look good against one.
Yeah, oh yeah.
is.
Yeah, just ask Rory McDonald, right? Last one, fact or fiction. This is the best year in UFC's history.
Well, Dana White said
I mean,
so.
the president of the UFC said this is the best one, so of
The
course.
best.
Yeah, of course.
You don't know what you guys are talking about?
Of course.
How dare you?
Of course.
The absolute best.
Absolutely.
It's not even close.
Fact.
Fact, okay.
Well, because we got it from the president of the company. Well, but what more can we want other
Right.
than that? Come on, of course.
Fiction. But,
Come on.
but
Does not know what he's talking about.
Absolutely
look,
not.
I mean, I really, looking at the calendar towards the end of the year and with this event, they really managed to turn things around. But then all these injuries came
Yeah.
out, man.
Yesterday was kind of a depressing day.
It was. It was just injury after another. And I really think if things would have kept together, man, they would have closed the year in a great way, especially with this card and the cards that were coming. But man, all these injuries and the Holly Holm.
Holly
Cyborg
Holm and the
thing,
Wonder Boy.
it's just-
It's an interesting story to follow, 219, because remember, they announced Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunez as the main event for the year-end show in September. It's now almost mid-November. That show's in a month and a half. That's supposed to be like one of their,
Right.
tentpole events, if you will, and there's still no main event. Maybe Connor comes and saves the day, maybe someone else, but we shall see. As of right now, Holly Holm and their team say thanks, but no thanks. This was fun, guys. Did you enjoy it?
My MMA Hour debut, and
Yes.
I had Georges St-Pierre as my opening act. I mean, wow, this is pretty awesome.
And the most good-looking man in the world in the middle? Not Danny. I mean,
Somebody else.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what a day. It's the MMA Beat meets the MMA Hour. This has been a long time coming. I appreciate you guys doing this. Thank you very much for coming in. Rob, you can hit my music. We are out of time. The guys in the back are going to be very upset at me because I went 5 minutes over. But there was so much to get in today. We could have gone. This feels weird. I feel like, because usually I'm on this set and I go 75 hours. I feel like I'm actually being lazy today, right? I feel like I'm not really putting it in my...
You did a show on Mondays.
That's true. That's true. You like these guys, Jeff?
I do.
Yeah, this is nice. This
They're
is
not. They're
Fedor.
agreeing with you.
This is, this is Mr. Hoyce, and this is, I think it's Randy Couture. That's what they tell me.
It looks kind of slim, but
Well, there was a lot more that we could talk about. Of course, Norfolk coming up. Best fight on that card. Anyone have a say? Matt Brown not retiring anymore against Diego Sanchez. Of course, Anthony Pettis against Dustin Poirier. Sage Northcutt back. Marlon Moraes versus John Dodson.
John Dodson.
That is a great fight.
yeah.
Looking forward to that. Also, Bellator back on Friday, so another busy week in the world of MMA. I want to thank Georges St-Pierre for coming in. I want to thank his team. I want to thank the UFC for bringing him in as well. What an honor, what a privilege that was. It was so great to have him in studio. Royalty, really. For Canadians, royalty. It was amazing to have him in there. You guys are not bad as well. And then we followed that up with Paulo Costa and, of course, Eric Albarracin coming in, flying in to do this. It has been a great day. Like I said, I could do this every day. If we get guests like that, wow, what a pleasure. Wake up every day, do that. That is a dream come true. And I want to thank both Danny and Jeff for coming in as well. So this has been a special Thursday edition of the show. Back Monday for our regular MMA hour. Then Thursday we'll be back, of course, for the MMA Beat. There's a long stretch of shows where we're doing MMA Beat every week. So get used to that. But for now, we shall say goodbye again. Thank you so much to GSP. Congratulations on the win. Thank you very much to Paulo Costa. Borrachinha. Thank you very much to him for coming in, and congratulations. Of course, thank you to Danny, Jeff, the rest of the crew. Peace. I'm out of here. We'll see you on Monday for the MMA Hour.